Hello, greetings, everyone. We hope that you are well and that you're having a wonderful and productive day. We're glad that you're joining us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Thank you for joining us. Our topic today is a good one. It is our revolutionary ideology comes from our African culture. And what we're going to be talking about in relation to that is what is revolutionary African personality? What is the difference between our revolutionary Pan African ideology and ideologies like Marxist Leninism and Maoism and Trotskyism? What is the difference between those ideologies and Nkrumahism, Touréism, Cabralism? And how important is ideology? Is it even important? Because some people say, I don't have an ideology. And when people say that, like, I don't have any ideology, that's like saying, I don't breathe oxygen. So that's how we're going to be talking about the topic today. So we're glad that you're here for that. We give honor, respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Here in this backward society, they are fighting for their dignity the same way we're fighting for ours. We know the challenges with that. We know the obstacles. We know the victories. So we stand with them and encourage them to continue forward as we will continue forward in our quest for forward progress and liberation. And for all of our peoples, that means regaining our land rights, our land reclamation. For them, that's the Americas. For us, it's Africa. And that's the work that we are engaged in to carry out. And that, of course, carries us to our African ancestors who are giving us the entire blueprint for how we can move forward. We had a very wonderful Pan African Women's Day program in Oakland yesterday. We have Pan African Women's Day program coming up this coming Saturday here in Sacramento. It's, of course, Black August. There are a lot of wonderful things going on, and they're reminders. August 11th will be the what is it, 61st commemoration of the Watts riot, rebellion rather, in LA. And so these are things that remind us of the struggle we're engaged in, right? That's what these institutions do, is remind us of that. And these are reflections of the type of energy and struggle that our ancestors want us to have. And all of you can feel the pulse of our ancestors if you allow yourself to do it. I mean, I feel it strongly, but I'm not derailed or there's no mist for me from these the European interpretations of these religions. I don't have that. So because I don't have any of those things obstructing my spiritual foundation, I can feel our ancestors very strong because I look to them when I'm in doubt, when I'm confused about what to do, when I'm in a dangerous situation, which is often the case, when I'm faced with danger doing this work, I look to the ancestors. People that aren't connected to our ancestors, they might look to the police when they're in danger, which if you do that, you're clearly not connected to our ancestors. But I don't do that. I look towards our ancestors and they always, 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 always give me clear direction. Give it to me. They tell me this is how you want to proceed. Don't panic. Look to this direction. Think about this. Here's the solution. I always get solutions from the ancestors. And so I know that I wouldn't be here were it not for them. And so I know you wouldn't be here if it were not for them, whether you know that or not. So we give honor to our African ancestors, and they are African ancestors. They're not Negroes in America ancestors. They're not foundational Negro Black American ancestors. They're none of that. They're African ancestors. We were Africans when we were brought here. And we were brought here. The overwhelming majority, only a small fraction of us came here as explorers thousands of years ago. A very small fraction, a minute fraction, a fraction that's negligible. The overwhelming majority, and all the evidence is overwhelming about that. Anybody saying any difference, they don't have any evidence. And those people, when they try to engage people like me, they don't, they don't stand up very long. Like that's insanity. Like all we got to do is start talking about. I ask them questions about their life, and from that, I make the connections to Africa in ways they don't even know. Right? Like I ask them, do they eat gumbo, for example? And they'll say things like, "Oh, I love gumbo. My family's been making gumbo for generations." And then I ask them, "Well, do you know what the word gumbo means?" "No, I don't know." "What does it mean?" "Gumbo means okra." in, in African languages, that's what it means is okra. Like in Fante, in Wolof, that's what the word means. So, I mean, I can go on a million years with this kind of stuff we do every day that's not foundationally in America, it's African. That's what it is. It's not indigenous to the Western Hemisphere, it's African. That's what it is. So we thank them and we give introductions as we always do. We do this program every week. Our Ancestor Voices is sponsored by All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP, which is a revolutionary independent mass Pan-African political party with a base in Africa, with an objective of Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one united socialist Africa, united Africa. What's happening in the Sahel with Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. It's happened before with Ghana, Guinea, and Mali in 1960 with Nkrumah, with Sekou Touré, and with Madibo Keita, who were the revolutionary leaders in those countries during that time. So these Africans today are attempting to resurrect that as they should, but we need it for the entire continent. We can't facilitate any independence just with Burkina Faso or Mali or Niger or even all three of them combined. We need all of Africa united. And so that's what Pan Africanism is. And it needs to be under a scientific socialist government. Capitalism enriched itself off of exploiting us. So how can we think that we could buy our way, purchase our way into that system and achieve freedom that way? And how has that worked out for the masses of us? A few individuals of us could do that, but the masses could never do that because capitalism, in order for people to get rich, there has to be a large poor population. That's how capitalism works. So guess who that large poor population has historically been designated to be? And that's why we're in the situation we're in. So our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, it's outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, the title page, which is on this screen. And our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu. I am a longtime organizer within the APRP, and my biological and ideological daughter, Dr. now, Shakura Umi, who is also an organizer in the APRP. So to get us started on this topic today of our revolutionary ideology comes from our culture, I hand it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. We hope you are well. Thank you so much for being with us. This is such an important topic. Let's jump right in. So, we start with talking about how, even with us knowing that the oppressor has lied and will continue to lie to us, so even with that in mind, despite the lies, as well as the misinformation, the manipulation of information and the deceit that comes from the capitalist system, because it is very much intended to convince us that our social circumstances that we are facing as a people is a definition of our culture. We must know better and we should know better, right? We should know that the capitalist system is designed to make us second guess ourselves, to make us doubt ourselves. We always talk about the imposter syndrome, but usually people are framing it from the individualistic perspective, when in actuality, it should very much be framed as a capitalist entity, I would argue, especially because the conditions that you find yourself in, you didn't become your own reason as to why those conditions are yours, right? Baba Jamu and I were laughing the other day at one of the lines from one of the Friday movies. I think it was the first one with Chris Tucker, when he was upset with Ice Cube because he commented on the groceries that he had in his house, and he said, "You always have one of something and not the other, and we need both. You have peanut butter, no jelly. You have bread, no jelly, and yeah, it's funny, ha ha ha. But actually, why is that? Why is it that people don't have cereal, but they have milk, right? Why is that? And I would argue a lot of that has to do with capitalism. How much time and labor does it take to get to the grocery store with a pre thought out grocery list, first of all? Second of all, like you're able to clearly mark what you have. You've been able to set a budget that you can stick with, right? I've already lost some of you because some of us don't even have the capabilities to do that. We have to kind of gauge what we can afford once we get there, especially because we're trying to see what the prices are going to be once we get there. And that's assuming they even have what we need in stock. They may not even have it in stock. So then we have to go to another grocery store, but we didn't budget to go to 5 grocery stores today. We just had time to go to one. So now we spent 3 hours just trying to get some milk, right? Because these are the circumstances that we find ourselves in. That is very much connected to capitalism. That is very much connected to supply and demand. That's very much connected to affluency based on the neighborhood you live in, how certain grocery stores are going to have more nicer products. If you understand what I'm saying, they're going to have more healthier options. All of that is based on capitalism. It's based on white supremacy and colonialism, sure, but it's very much based on capitalism because there is an assumption around these private companies trying to harness a way to exploit and to make money off of you based on what they think you want to buy for your family, right? So we have to kind of think through that and understand that we have to know better. All people have culture, and culture, simply put, is a summary of a people's experiences. Simply put, it is a summary of a people's experiences. These experiences might include how they engage with something. They might include how they engage with the conditions and then how they define those conditions or define their reality based on those conditions. It could be any one of those things. It could also be how they define how they can shape those conditions. Right. And so it's important for us to talk about this. This is so, so important because I know that some Europeans feel like they don't have a culture, but that simply can't be true, especially if we look at the summary of a people's experiences as the base definition of that, right? We even have this lovely photo of our comrade Ahmed Sekou Toure, who said that culture is, quote, the sum total of all people's experiences, end quote. And so we have to just think through that a little bit and understand that, the conditions that we're in, how we have navigated this world, how we have understood our navigations in this world, how society perceives us, and how we as a people are determining what our mark is on society. All of that is based on our ability to reform or to adjust or to develop what we think to be culture can be. Right. And so just kind of understanding that. And I would also encourage us to lean more towards Comrade Ahmed Sekou Toure's definition and less based on defining culture from a white supremacy standpoint, because you're already setting yourself up for failure if you're using the colonizers' ways and terms and definitions to define your own life, right? That's not really going to help you in the long term because you obviously have a different way of going about doing things, especially because you're trying to resist that. So continuing to redefine what culture means from you, I would argue using Ahmed Sekou Toure's definition is one of the first steps to do that. Understanding that these people's experiences define what their culture is. Baba Jamu spoke about, the term gumbo, right? And I'm so excited to just continue learning about all the different ways that our people have been so resilient and we have been so impactful to other people's cultures, yes, but even to our ability to survive, right? So it gives me great pleasure to think about how intuitive it was for us to think about the hairstyle of cornrows and how they really were mapping out layers and escape plans to other enslaved Africans, right? And to the untrained eye, you wouldn't necessarily believe that our people were not only capable, sophisticated, and wise enough to use our hairstyles as a way to communicate silently, but not silently, if you understand what I'm saying, what the escape plan was for other enslaved Africans who were on that plantation, right? Also, many of you know, but some of you may not know, the round puff ball that you might call a hush puppy actually also originated from enslaved times. And so what would happen was, of course, Europeans would sick dogs on us. And that's unfortunately why a lot of Africans today have trauma when it comes to dealing with dogs, especially canine, German shepherds, dogs like that. But back in the day, they would use these same hush puppies because the Europeans would sick their dogs on us. So we got smart enough. We went in the kitchen. We used the scraps that were given to us based on our prior knowledge of how we used to cook when we were at home on the continent. We created these hush puppies. And that's why they're called hush puppies, because we would throw them while the dogs were on our trail. And the dogs were very curious because they liked the smell of it. So they would stop and eat. And before you knew it, they couldn't pick up our trail anymore. And I argue part of that is because we also understood the connection between science and nature and land, and how we could even use the environment to survive. A lot of us understood that when you encompass yourself within a body of water, your scent is untraceable for the dogs at that point. So we found a way to use those kind of things. And I read about this recently. In addition to us finding a way to mask ourselves in the water and bodies of water when we knew people were looking for us, the slave catchers were looking for us, we also would saturate any type of clothing that we could get our hands on. But in most cases, it would be large sheets or robes or quilts of some type. We would completely submerge those quilts, and then we would hang them from the trees. And I guess we would makeshift with the line to hang it on or whatnot. So then you have this large saturated quilt that is dripping, right? And because the quilt is completely wet, it would literally create a space to encompass a hideout for our ancestors, because again, the smell, the scent of our bodies was masked out by not only the water but also the material being wet itself. None of this was taught to us, you all. None of this was taught to us, but these are all examples of our experiences and how we found a way to communicate that to each other. And don't even get me started on the drums. Don't even get me started on how that was a main way that we were communicating with one another, which is fascinating to me, because I think even thinking about the word communication is dangerous if you're only rooting it in white supremacy. Because if you're not careful, white supremacy will tell you that communication is about exchanging messages. Yeah, that's part of it. But also, when you hear drums, you know that certain beats from the drum and certain sounds from the drum mean what you need to do the next day, the day after that, how you need to move forward, because it was discussed and you understood what that looked like. There's just so many different ways that we could talk about that. And even to this day, when I think about us using drums to communicate with one another, I smile, because I think about how that evolved into you talking to someone and maybe the person is African and you say, well, and they're like, so much was said just now. You don't even understand. So much was said right now. And again, like the white supremacy will say, well, you just made a sound. Did I? Even now, there's a little bit more to that, right? But if you're not aware, right? If you're not encompassed with it, if you're not fluent, I guess is the word we can use, then it might be hard for you to wrap your brain around it, right? I had a teacher growing up, and I had a classmate, European, and he got the answer right. We were in kindergarten. He got the answer right. And the teacher was African, and she was so excited that he got the answer right. And she said, you go, student. And the student was very confused because no one had trained them on Ebonics, right? So they didn't understand. And the student said, where do you want me to go? And I just remember that even as a child. And of course, now, like, we can laugh at it because it was so cute and so funny, right? But one of the Zoom people was cracking up. I love it. But even then, like, that's clearly an example of how we need to protect what we have, you all. So then the teacher was trying to explain to them, no, 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 I don't want you to physically go anywhere. I'm just really proud of you for getting the answer correct, right? So these are just different ways that we need to protect our culture, you all. We don't need to run away from it. We don't need to shy from it. We don't need to be embarrassed by it. And society will teach you that you do need to be embarrassed, but you have to be stronger than that. Next slide, please. You have to understand that you are more than capable and you have a right to practice your culture. You have a right to embrace it. You have a right to be your culture. Even though society will tell you otherwise, you have every right to do that. The minute you stop doing that, and you buy into the fact that you need to assimilate or you need to have an appropriate acculturation of some type, that's when you start to lose who you are. And it's very dangerous to do that, especially in a world where you are constantly being taught that you're not enough. And I'm not just talking about Africans, I'm talking about anyone who experiences oppression. Any type of oppression that you experience, you were constantly being told that you're not enough. You're constantly being told that you were deficient. You're constantly being told that you are incapable, you are inadequate. It's up to us, you all, to learn how to resist that messaging. That's up to us, unfortunately. We can't expect the oppressor to console us after they just harmed us. That would be like being in some type of abusive situation and you're thinking that the person who just harmed you is now going to hug you and make you feel better. And in some cases, yes, but usually that's connected to a deeper level of manipulation. It's connected to exploitation. It's not genuine. It's not pure, and it's certainly not going to last very long, right? It's only temperamental until something else happens for the oppressor to get upset with us again, right? And so I just think it's important for us to kind of think through these steps. And then I just want to talk about ideology, and then I'll share a quick quote and pass it back to Baba Ajamu. So even with our ideology, right? The ideology can be a set of ideas that usually will help you guide and develop what your actions are going to be, right? And so you, whatever your ideology is, that is going to frame how you navigate your life and make the choices that you make, right? So no actions happen without ideas that guide them. And we can just think for a second about what that means for each of us. If you're not in an organization that's working for justice, but you still consider yourself to be an ally, then maybe social justice is one of those ideologies that defines what your actions are, right? If you are in an organization that's working for justice, excuse me, then maybe you can start to think about what are some of the core values of that organization? What do you most agree with? And what drew you in to consider that you wanted to become a part of that organization? I know that Baba Ajama will talk about some of the concepts of ideology that we have in the All African People's Revolutionary Party and in the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't at least just talk about collectivism as one of my favorites. There's more that we have, but that is literally one of my favorites because it always reminds me that we can't be in this organizing work by ourselves. And I mean, we can't just enforce our own ideologies. We have to find a way to loop our ideologies together. We have to find a way to connect them. We have to find what we do agree on because we may not agree on everything. So, what is the one thing that we can agree on so that we can come together and therefore be collectivists in nature so that the larger number of African people can benefit from our work, right? We don't want to set things back farther and we don't want to delay our work getting done. So, how do we figure out how to come together and work together so that we can do that, right? And so, just kind of thinking about how everything you do is guided by your ideology, even when you eat and use the bathroom, that is guided by a set of ideas, right? As I just mentioned, if you're choosing to go grocery shopping, usually there are some actions that a person needs to take before they step inside the grocery store. Whether you make a grocery list or not, do you have enough gas to get to the grocery store? If you're riding your scooter, do you have enough juice on the scooter? Were you able to collect the payment in time so that you could get the scooter used in a way, or get the lift to take you? Or if there's a bus running, then you have to organize your schedule based on how you're going to take the bus to get to the grocery store. Does the grocery store have hours that work with your schedule? Or do you need to figure out how to go in the morning when people are less likely to be there because they're at work, right? It would be the same with anything else that we're doing. If you're traveling and going out of town and you need to set up the house sitter to come and water your plants, if you need to take your dog to the daycare so that your dog can be taken care of, there are steps in a series that need to be complete just in order for you to get that portion of your task done so that you can move on to the other things, right? And so it's just really important that we kind of think about this because I don't know if we really actually think about this. And again, I'm speaking as an organizer. So if you're not in an organization, you might not be thinking about how you tend to go in a step-by-step process on a day-to-day basis. And if you're not doing things from a step-by-step process, then that could really add more stress and harm to your plate because then that means that maybe things could have been thought about a little bit differently if you had given it a little bit more time, if you had used Kwame Ture's comment and quote when he says organization decides everything, then maybe things would have ended up having a different outcome, right? And so, like, not only enforcing the ideology because it guides our actions, but also thinking about how does this ideology protect our ability to make the best informed actions that we can make? It was also Kwame Ture that said sometimes we have to know the difference between being selfish and wisely selfish. So, what does that even mean in terms of us choosing our actions to be wisely selfish versus us being perceiving ourselves as being selfish, right? And I'll just close with this quote from Maya Angelou. I mean, we could talk all day about how contradictory she is, But since we're talking about the importance of ancestry, and since we're talking about the importance of having a culture that is connected to your ancestors, I do think this quote is appropriate. She says, quote, "I go forth as one, but I stand as 10,000." And what I took away from that, end quote, is that we are never alone. So if you are not connected to your ancestry, if you are not connected to who your ancestors are, if these are not conversations that you're having where you can name people or where you feel safe and comfortable to name people who you think will have your back, then maybe that's the first step that you need to take, because it's quite possible that your ancestors have already given you the tools of what your ideology might look like. And if you're not connected to them, then how would you even know how to tap into that? Always, always, always join an organization that is working for justice. Always, always, always increase your political education by any means necessary. Ashe.
Ashe, Obrigada, Asante Sana, Midasi, Nguni, appreciate it. And just to pick up, I want to make an additional point about ideology. It's, without question, a set of ideas, but those ideas, when you talk about revolutionary ideology, the ideas are rooted in principles. So when Shakur talks about collectivism, that is a principle that we move collectively. We don't move just individually. That's a principle. It's an ideological principle. So if we believe that, we can't violate it. So in other words, I can't say, well, I'm a revolutionary ideology person and I believe in collectivism as a principle of my revolutionary ideology. But then when it's time to when there's not enough food for everybody to eat, food is a problem. There's an apocalypse of some sort, and we're struggling to get things to eat. And then I'm sneaking food and eating it myself, and I don't have any concern for the other people who don't have food. Then that's a violation of the principle. And if you accept revolutionary ideology to guide your life, you cannot violate your principles. And so that leads to like there's confusion within this concept of revolutionary ideology. I mean, there's so much we could talk about, but we only have an hour. So again, as I always say, the hope is that what we do bring up can inspire people to seek out more on your own in your organizations that you're in or that you're hopefully going to form or join if you're not in one. So that's a kind of the goal. But in terms of just this discussion right now, um, we have to recognize that when we say revolutionary ideology, or even just when we say revolution in today's world, for most folks, your framework of what that connects to is the Bolshevik uprising in Russia in 1917. And that's when I say that, I don't mean it as a positive thing, because for the last more than 100 years, capitalism has done everything it could in terms of propaganda to diminish the concept of revolution and make it sound like it's a utopia that could never happen. And when people have attempted to make it happen, like they did in Russia, that it's really in a totalitarian regime, meaning that all the decisions are made from the top and there's no democracy and people can't decide anything and they're just herded like sheep. That's what the capitalist system has worked so hard over a century now in convincing people that revolution is. So let's establish that right now. And also along with that, that any revolutionary ideology evolves around the people who were instrumental in influencing the Bolshevik uprising in Russia, like Karl Marx on your screen on the left, Vladimir Lenin, who of course was one of the initial leaders of the Bolshevik uprising. Karl Marx was the German economist, right? He wasn't involved in the Russian uprising, but his ideas greatly influenced it. Lenin was involved in it. So this is the thought process that they want us to accept, that these two people, and there are several others, Frederick Engels and so forth, these are the people that created revolutionary ideology. This is what they want you to believe. And so this is why we get Africans who have not studied socialism at all, can't point to a single book about socialism that they've ever read, But you find so many Africans today saying, well, socialism, that's a white man's concept, that's a white man's ideology. Because the capitalists have skillfully constructed the narrative in a way that makes it appear as if Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, Frederick Engels, etc., were the founders of revolutionary ideology, were the founders of scientific socialism. They've crafted it that way. And so these are the problems that we face today, right? Like people define it based on Russia primarily, and they define it based on these white men being the face of revolutionary ideology. But the truth of the matter is that the principles of revolution, which speak to people before profits, right? A system that's designed to serve people's needs first and not serve people's pocketbooks. The opposition to the dominance of capital, meaning a society that's organized around prohibiting the run roughshod tactic of capital overcoming everything like exists in this backward cesspool society where capital rules everything. Capital can move people off of lands, capital can destroy neighborhoods, capital can displace people, capitalism can imprison people, murder people because of capital. Well, in a socialist society, of course, the idea is to prevent these things from happening. And this concept is rooted in the principle of good versus evil, which is what we mean when we talk about dialectical and historical materialism, that the world is in conflict. And that conflict is defined as the battle of opposites, good versus evil. And the question is, which one will dominate? Which one will you contribute your life to help dominate? That's the question. All of us have good and bad in them. It's dialectics. All of us have good. No one is all good. No one is all bad. The question is, what will we contribute to make dominant? But these ideas have always existed. They can never be because they're rooted in the fundamental existence of the galaxy and human beings. So it's science, in other words. So it can never be created by any one person or two people or five people or 10 people. It's rooted in human culture, in human desire to advance and develop, just like music. Like people say, well, Beethoven invented music. Well, we were drumming drums before Beethoven's ass was ever thought of. So how the hell could he create music? He didn't create music. He was just the first person we know of to document the concept of writing down notes and having sheet music or whatever that is. I'm not a musician, but he was the one who is credited with doing that. I don't know if he was actually the first one to do it or not, but he's historically been the first person people talk about when they talk about the concept of written sheet music. The same with physics. People talk about, Sir Isaac Newton, and they talk about he invented physics. How could he invent physics? To say that is to say that before Sir Isaac Newton, if a body fell, it would fall at a different rate of 32 per second or whatever that is. And of course, we know that it would fall at the same rate, whether it happened in Africa, whether it happened here in the Western world, in Europe, Antarctica, it would still be the same. So he was just the first person to document the concept of physics. He didn't invent it. Well, by the same token, Vladimir Lenin and Karl Marx didn't invent scientific socialism. We know that there were Africans in Africa who talked about surplus capital in the 12th century. Ibn Khaldun, look him up. He was an African in North Africa who talked about the contradiction of labor and capital in the 12th century, before we even had capitalism, before we even had the industrial revolution. He talked about it in the concept of monarchies, which were dominant then. This was in Africa, long before Karl Marx. In fact, Karl Marx used some of the ideas that came from people like Khaldun and others to develop his philosophy. So we got to stop this nonsense about socialism is a white man's concept. That's insanity. The origins of socialism stem from communalism, which had practice wider nowhere more so than in Africa. Nowhere in the world was communalism practiced more than it was in Africa. That's a historical fact. So if communism You can look at the words. Communalism, communism, clearly the root word of communism is is related to communalism. Why are you giving our culture away saying, well, that's a white man's concept, just because you're too lazy to study it and understand it properly? Just be honest. Just say, I ain't gonna, here's a book. Here's Das Kapital. Here's Consciousism by Kwame Nkrumah, right? Here's Strategies and Tactics of the African Revolution by Sekou Touré. Here's Unity and Struggle by Amilcar Cabral. I'm too lazy to read that. Okay, just say that. I don't want to read all that. So that's what it is. So let's clear that up right away and keep it moving, right? The next thing is, why do we say culture, you all? Why do we say culture? Because the reason why we say our ideology comes from culture is that there are fundamental differences between Marxist Leninism, Maoism, Trotskyism, anarchism, and the ideology that we practice in the AAPRP, and Nkrumahism, Touréism, and Cabralism. And this is not to say, because again, there's so much confusion around this. This is not to say that we are rejecting Marxist Leninism, Maoism, Trotskyism. We are not. We believe that those ideologies have relevance to a lot of struggles on the planet Earth. We just don't believe that they accurately represent what we need as African people. So for the people to say, well, socialism is a white man's concept, like, just would you study more, please? I mean, you're polluting the environment and giving me a damn headache with constantly saying things that have been disproven long ago, right? So that needs to be understood. When we say our revolutionary ideology, we're talking about ideas that come from the masses of people, right? But they're articulated, they've been written down. I just explained this by people like Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and Amilcar Cabral. We're not saying that those three men created the concept of revolutionary African ideology. They certainly documented it. Their documents are here for us to study and learn from. But I would argue that revolutionary African ideology has always been here in many different forms. And like the picture there, although Africans exist all over the world, we still possess common cultural traits based upon our history. And what I mean by that is every African on the planet Earth, all 2.5 billion of us, possess three elements in our makeup today in 2026. Three makeups. All of us possess some element of traditional Africa. And you could say the way we look, the texture of our hair, our skin color, where our nose and our lips, these types of things, our body structure, how we walk, all of these things, how we sound. These are reflections that, these are things that reflect how we've always been before we came to the Western Hemisphere, right? We were not here, contrary to the myths that people want to believe. We were not here in this form. We were at home in Africa. These are traits from traditional Africa. Then also there's the Judeo-Christian period in Africa. Those of us, not even just, that's not just saying people that practice Christianity, Africans that probably, that's certainly a part of it, but the entire process of colonialism and colonizing us under the guise of Christianity. Many of us possess that. And then, of course, Islam, the same thing. Many of us came through the introduction of Islam into Africa in 7,000 AD. So this is the reality. I can't remember AD, BC. I get dyslexic about it, but you understand what I'm saying. So the point is that all of us have all three of these elements within us. Some of us may have more of one than the other, but all of us possess all three. And these are the things that reflect the dialectical struggle that brings us to revolutionary African ideology today. And because of that, there are fundamental differences in our revolutionary Pan-African ideology than there are in with Marxism, Marxist-Leninism, Maoism, Trotskyism, etc. And most people never talk about this, so that's what this space is for. We're going to talk about them here. So, what are those differences? Well, first, I'll go back and say I didn't say that one of the things that I think is fundamental is that in African culture, at least at the point that we're at right now, and this is everywhere. I mean, I've seen this all throughout Africa, Europe, all throughout this country, this backward country, and every in the Caribbean, everywhere I've been, is that we have a need and desire to recognize people as symbols of who we are. That's very important to us at this stage in our history. So this is the reason why people look to people like Barack Obama, right? He's a symbol for us, and that's very important for us. This is why people have looked to people in Africa the same way. This is why religious figures in our community hold such substance with us. And unfortunately, it's also the reason why we're easily betrayed, right? So this is why the way we look at things, we look at it like, okay, our ideology comes from three men, when really I would like to see us get to a point where we recognize that our ideology comes from our culture, comes from all of us on some level. And these folks wrote things down, but a whole lot of people have written things down that we use and contribute. Not taking anything. I love all three of these men. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the three of them and many others. But I'm just making the point that this is a part of our culture. This is why we identify, and there are examples I can show you that you will understand, right? Uh, when Will Smith started his acting career in movies in the 90s, this is after the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air television show. I think one of the first movies, it's not the first movies he did, was 6 Degrees of Separation, I think was the title. And in that movie, he played a character that um, essentially could have been queer. I don't remember. It was 30 years since I saw the movie, so I'm not sure. Some of you may know better, but I know that there was a question in the movie about the character Will Smith played being queer, and Will Smith talked about. And I'm not a fan of Will Smith. Okay. I'm not a fan of these people. I'm just using it as an example. But he talked about at that time that the directors of the movie wanted him to kiss a man in the movie. And he talked to Denzel Washington about that at that time. This 30 years ago. So I'm not saying this to get anybody in trouble. I'm just telling you what he said. You can look up the interview. But he said that Denzel told him that you have to understand that when white actors act, they're acting for themselves. When we act, we're acting for our entire culture. And my point in that is that this is what I mean when I say we look to people as symbols more than other people do that. And so for us at this stage, it's important for us to identify symbols as our ideology. Now, I know when we were in Guinea-Bissau 3 years ago at our party Congress, this debate came up about the name of our ideology. And I proposed that we name it after an African phrase, and people like that, but it's like people could not let go. We were in Guinea-Bissau, the home of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC, the home of Amilcar Cabral. And we had militants in the room, dozens of militants who are students of Amilcar Cabral, as they should be. And they were like, yes, we hear what you're saying, but we want to have Cabral's name on the ideology. We had people in the room from Burkina Faso who of course, see themselves as the adherents of Thomas Sankara. They were like, well, Thomas Sankara, should be. We had people in the room from Tanzania, South Africa, who said, well, we want Robert Sobukwe to be included. We had people in the room from Ghana who said that, well, it should be Kwame Nkrumah as it is. And then we had some of us from the US, like myself, that if we call it by name, I would say Malcolm X should be there. That's the reason why I'm here. And I made the argument. I said that, we could, if we do it like this, our ideology is going to be 30 names. We have to be called out. I'm a Nkrumah's, Torres, Cabrales, Sobukwe Sankaris, Lumumba Malcolm X Marcus Garvey Asada Shakur it'll go on forever. So that's why I said we should choose a revolutionary African phrase in Tree or Swahili or something. But it was clear to me in the debate, we're just not ready to do that. I think it's correct, but we're not ready to do that. And I recognize and respect that that's just a part of our culture. It's not a bad part. It's just where we are in this dialectical struggle, right? So that's important. But let's talk about some of the things that are different from our revolutionary African ideology and the ideologies that come out of Europe and Asia and other places. Number one, African culture is mass, you all. We're mass in culture. That's why African organizations, like European organizations, have this strict security culture thing. Like, you have to know somebody to come. You have to be vetted by somebody to come. You have to be approved by people to come. We don't have that. In the APRP, we don't have that. We invite every African to join. We want them to go to an ideological transformation process. You don't have to be vetted to join one of our work study groups. You do have to demonstrate your capability and commitment, and that's why we have a process. Your work study first, then your pre-cadre, then your cadre, but you don't have to be vetted. We want every African. Our party's a mass party. Every African is welcome. Europeans have the vanguard parties. Marxist-Leninist parties are vanguard parties, meaning only certain people can join. And in many cases, you can't even know that they're in the party. We don't operate like that. Those of you that have done any work with us, you know the first thing out of our mouth is we are members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We tell you that. We are for Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. We tell you that. If you get up and run out the room or kick us out the room, it won't be because you don't know who we are. So our culture is different in that way. It's mass. We don't require all those other things. And those that do, that argue that we should, they're not any farther along than we are. In fact, I would argue that I like the way we do it better because it's more humanistic. Because the problem I have with the other approach is people talking about who needs to be vetted. Who vetted you? How do I know you can be trusted? A lot of those people end up being the people that sell out the movement. So I love the mass culture uh, approach because I think that it's correct. I think that the way that we vet people is by struggling with them to engage in principled ideological struggle and to develop that way. And I'm not saying that we have mastered, we clearly have not mastered that. We are infants. I'm talking about the AAPRP. We are infants as it relates to understanding the necessity of principled ideological struggle. And I don't care if party people, they get mad at that. They cannot disagree with it in any kind of uh, real fashion. But the difference between me and a lot of people is that I'm not saying that to denounce us. Obviously, I'm committed to this work. I'm saying that because I know I have to have a commitment to contribute to us getting to that point. Well, we certainly know that the best way we can do that is through mass participation. All our parties are mass. PAIGC, mass. TDG, mass. PAC, mass. APRP, mass. All our parties are mass, y'all. That's our culture. Another approach is our approach to spirituality and revolution. Most of the time, the European influenced revolutionary parties are as far away from spiritual faith as they can be. You know, and people always talk about Marx talking about, religion being the opium of the people, but I'm saying it goes deeper than that. If you look at the history of Europe, we all know that Europe has a strong history of religious intolerance. Nobody can refute that rather. It can't be refuted because this backward cesspool country and all of the colonies in this hemisphere result from people escaping religious persecution in Europe. We all know that. We learned that even in bourgeois school, we learned that. So there's no question about that. So because of that, religions always had a difficult time developing in Europe because that's the history of Europe. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad had to go into Africa to have time to develop the religion of Islam as he wanted to articulate it. And Christianity, Jesus, if you look at the Bible, any version of the Bible, Africa is mentioned in the very beginning in the book of Genesis. Europe isn't mentioned until the end, the book of Revelations. So no major religions. And Judaism, without question, had its imprint in the Middle East and Africa. So none of the major forms of spiritual worship, so-called major, have any strong roots in Europe. That's just the history of Europe. So I'm saying that because if you understand that, it shouldn't be hard to understand why revolutionary parties influenced by Europe are gonna be, oh no, religion is not something we want to be a part of. But Africa is different, you all. We have a different relationship to spirituality than European culture. Spirituality is a critical part of our culture. And it would be very difficult. No revolutionary organization within the African community would have any level of success organizing if they denounced people's spiritual worship. I'm just telling you that with a fact. You would never, in fact, when we organize among our people, some of the first questions they ask is, what is your position on faith? They want to know that. And we tell them, well, we have people that are Christians, we have people that are Muslims, we have people that are Jews, we have people that are atheists, we have people that practice Ife, Santeria, we have everything. Because again, we're all African People's Revolutionary Party. So we can never just be Christian, we can never just be Muslim, we can never just be any one, because our people are everything. Our people are all of those things, including atheism. So that's a big difference. In fact, we view spirituality as a tool to strengthen us to fight against our enemies, to fight against capitalism. We view it like that. I give the example all the time, and I'll never tire of giving it. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, when they had burned her shack down in Mississippi in 1964, just because this brave woman dared to attempt to register to vote. They had fired her husband. They had beat her senseless for attempting to register to vote multiple times. And the camera crew from France, from Italy, from Britain, from Australia, they came from Canada, from all over this backward cesspool. They came to interview her in the shack. And the interview's on YouTube. You can watch it. And the European man asked her, he said, how does your faith play a role in helping you? And she didn't say what they have conditioned us to say today. Oh, well, I just want to pray on it. They brutalize and kill us today, and I'm just going to pray for them. No, she didn't say no nonsense like that. She looked at that man in his face and she said, I got a shotgun in each room here. There's only 3 rooms, and they're all loaded. And if these crackers come in here, I pray to Jesus for straight aim. See, that version of that type of Christianity, I'm all for that. Any church practicing that, I'll go to those services. I'll go there. But I don't want to go nowhere where they're talking about, oh, Jesus will come, and so we just got to suffer until Jesus gets here. That's colonialism right there, disguised as spiritual faith. So we don't reject faith, is my point. We accept faith. We revere faith, but the faith has to be consistent with the interests of our people and all of humanity. It can't be used as a weapon to keep us from fighting back against injustice. But we don't reject it at all, right? And then also another element where we differ is that if you look at Marx and how he talked about class, if you look at Marxist Leninism as a whole, the concept is that the class struggle is the entire struggle. And you'll hear people even in European influenced socialist organizations today, they'll say that, like, they totally reject nationalism 100%. Any form of nationalism to them is reactionary. Any form of nationalism to them is Adolf Hitler, right? It's nothing else but that. And they don't understand that nationalism has a place for colonized people, right? So we say that ideology is a part of the class struggle, and they don't accept that. So as it relates to incrementism, Traism, cabralism in action, no ideology, no matter how polished its articulation, is worth a bag of dog poop if it doesn't elevate its practitioners into becoming better human beings. The definition of that being, we have to be willing to learn to lead with our faults. We cannot lead with blaming somebody else. We got to start out with, I could have done this better. That's what our revolutionary ideology, and all revolutionary ideologies should do. And if they're not doing these things, they're not revolutionary ideologies. We have to be willing to be aggressively honest and taking action to correct problems. It doesn't mean we have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect, but we do have to be aggressively honest in recognizing that we have work to do to improve ourselves. A true revolutionary is always in psychological turmoil, always in conflict. You live your life in conflict. You're constantly questioning yourself because you want to become the best human being that you can. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm constantly in turmoil about everything, every damn thing, and I wouldn't have it any other way because I got a long way to go, but I've come a long way. And that's because I allow myself to be in turmoil and to recognize that that's a part of the dialectical struggle that I have to be engaged in. Leading our work with grace for others and not ego. That's a constant struggle for all of us. But being able to step back and play a supportive role, even if we don't agree, that is the true one of the true tests of revolutionary ideology and practice. And then also understand that this work is never about us. You do revolutionary work, you will constantly be disrespected every day. I'm telling you right now, it's just a part of the work. Your family, even your closest loved ones, don't really understand. And they mean well, but they don't understand. Friends don't understand. Nobody understands, and you will put in all the work, and people will just defecate on you, but you have to have a higher goal with this, and you have to have a higher vision so that you can understand that why you're doing this work. And I'll just say this, I might go a minute or two over, and I apologize, but it's just like yesterday, right? Like you have to balance. Just I'm just using my humble self. Like, we had a garage sale. Wife wanted to have a garage sale here, so we did that. I got up at 6 a.m. yesterday to carry all the things out and set up for the garage sale. Set up, sat at the garage sale. The garage sale went well, and by 11:30, I headed out to go to Oakland because we had Pan African Women's Day. We have Pan African Women's Day this Saturday here in Sacramento. So I could have been, well, I'm doing it in Sacramento. I got to go to Oakland. But that is not what we need right now as an organization. So I loaded up all the sound equipment in my car, all the materials, and drove down to Oakland and parked up on a hill. And I was already tired and put the stuff in a buggy and struggled to get it to where we were. And then we set up, we did the event, and it was a wonderful event. And then had to drive all the way back and get here, and then had work to do to put the stuff away from the garage sale. That's that's just a day. That's just one day. But my point is that I mean, I don't feel like I sat around and complained about it. I don't feel like I said anything about it. It's just what needs to be done. And I actually felt wonderful yesterday because it was such a wonderful day overall. Garage sale went well, the event went well, and we're here to fight another day. So we thank you for joining us. We want you to join us next week, August 9th. We're going to talk about Black August and the African Revolution. We want to talk about Black August. It's a wonderful day, but I think sometimes what gets lost in it is the people who Black August represents, the freedom fighters. They were fighting for revolution. So Black August can't be, a sale at Target, and I don't know if it is or not. I'm sure if they can make it one, they would. But if we don't protect the integrity of our institutions, we won't have them. The red and white QR code in the top left, you can go there and get information. Go to the Forward Ever shop. You can buy clothes and support our revolutionary work. The clothes will have uh, symbols and messages that support revolutionary ideology and action. So do that. This Saturday, August 8th, here in Sacramento, we invite everyone to Pan African Women's Day. It's going to be lit. We're going to have Dr. Mjiba Friawat from the University of Legon in Ghana. She's going to be present here in Sacramento to talk about our theme, which is African women leading the revolution. Salute to Assata Shakur and Tatina Sia, leaders within our liberation movement. And we're also going to have a wonderful performance from Straight Out Scribes, a wonderful mother-daughter team that will light you on fire with their words. We are serving food, so you don't even have to worry about eating. You can come out 3 to 5 at McClatchy Park. Look for the red, black, and green flag, bring your lawn chairs, come out. Come on out. Drive up, even if you don't live here. It'll be worth your while. Come on out and join the APRP. Go to aprp-intl.org and find out how you can get more information about joining. And then the QR code on the bottom right is for Burkina Books. It's actually for the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity, which is the AAPRP in Burkina Faso and Niger. We are want you to become a monthly sponsor so you can bring books, revolutionary books there to Sahel region in Africa. And then on Thursdays, every Thursday, we have community self-defense. 6 to 8 p.m., 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, Sacramento. We spar, you learn how to throw a proper punch, how to throw a proper kick, how to sidestep punishment, how to escape when someone grabs you. You know, we are not safe on these streets, y'all. So come and get some skills. You don't have to register. It doesn't cost anything. It's a community service from the All African People's Revolutionary Party in partnership with NorCal Resist, a wonderful organization that does La Migro work here in Sacramento. And lastly, my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacists, Patriarchal and Fascist Violence, a guide for organizing defense against white supremacists, patriarchal and fascist violence. It's only $8 paperback, $5 digital US dollars. 100% of the proceeds go towards the anti-fascist work. I use it to buy materials for the self-defense, materials for Pan-African Women's Day, materials for all the work that we do, right? Like we had, we had sound equipment out there yesterday. We'll have it this weekend. We don't have no electricity. That costs money to get equipment to be able to do that. And I can't just throw all that out of my pockets. I use the book proceeds to do it. So if you bought the book, great. But if buy some more, get a book, start a book club and read it, please. Call your librarian, ask them to order it. Call bookstores and ask them to order it. It's only $8. They can sell it for $12 and make plenty of money, right? And it 100% of whatever I get from it goes towards anti-fascist work. So we thank you. We invite you to come to all of these things. They're very important. Enjoy the rest of your day. Forward ever, backwards never. Always stay clever in any endeavor. Go ahead and pull that freedom lever. Have a good